as easily as they can in the Far East, where they have software patents, and in the United States, of course. Even though he's located in the UK, he has to pay for imaginary software patents. Microsoft never named those patents. It signed the deal with HTC on a kind of a retail basis, where they basically say, well, we have lots of patents. Some of them aren't operating system, and some of them aren't interface, and we basically kind of agree that we should pay, I don't know, £5 per phone to Microsoft on any HTC phone that's sold in the UK. And then a person like Tim himself is going to fund Microsoft by buying a phone that's obviously not Microsoft. That's the crazy world of software patents. You don't have to write code to make money from some code. You basically just have to write some piece of paper, and you can see everyone trying to implement something as fundamental as, I don't know, a progress bar or a one-click shopping, or in the case of Microsoft, you have things like tab browsing, and you have page down. These don't have to be tested in court. As soon as they get those patents, it's really hard to have them re-examined or to actually have them trashed permanently. So what actually tends to happen is those companies like HTC, Microsoft can come with a page down patent. Seriously, a page down patent probably predates the existence of Microsoft as a company, something of that sort. But HTC is not going to pay $1 million to argue with Microsoft and using lawyers and the whole thing to try to trash these patents, to have it re-examined from around China to go all the way to the United States patent office and try to have these trashed. So what they will do is they'll just pay based on the amount of patents that Microsoft presents, and they tend to come in bundles. So what Microsoft will do is it'll come to a company like HTC or to Samsung or LG, and they'll say, well, we've got these 20 patents. Well, you might not like one of those patents and think they're terrible, but you still have 19 patents to try and prove are not valid. And that's what Microsoft did with TomTom, and that's what Microsoft did with, I think one of the more recent lawsuits that you have was Motorola. And in case of Motorola, they use the same patents that they use against TomTom, and that's the FAT patent. That's the file allocation tables from the file system of Microsoft, which is hard to avoid because if you want to access some of your data files, if you want to have your device working with information, you kind of depend on that patent. That's an example of a sort of an API patent. It's a patent that impedes your access to information you own. And this is one of the reasons we encourage people also not to use Mono, because Mono is a piece which, when removed or when you find it to be infringing and needing removal, then you can destroy all the programs which depend on Mono. That's what makes it extremely dangerous. It's not just about removing a feature, it's about removing an entire layer of your system.
And sorry, if I could just interject very quickly there. And I think that's important what you said about Mono, because at the moment we have no mission critical apps that depend on it. And whilst we're in that position, the question I always ask the people is, why are you introducing, there may not be a risk, there may be a risk, but why are you introducing another external possible risk? The argument I often get when I've mentioned about a possible risk of Mono on systems is that there's already infringing patents within Linux, and my argument would be, well, why do we want to add to that with a possible further risk? Nothing critical, and there's a lot of people who contact me via email who don't have a clue about Mono, don't really know, they just use packages. So it's important for them to know there is nothing mission critical that requires Mono. So if that's the case now, why have it on your system at all? It's no loss. There's plenty of alternatives, and a lot of people will go through their Linux life and not even have Mono installed on the machine at all. A lot of people will have it on there and not realise, and I do recommend that people look further into it. If I could just go back, sorry, Roy, to what you said about HTC. Firstly, I've just checked. Yes, it is from Taiwan. It is based there. There was a question I wanted to ask you, which was bugging me at the time when we heard about the Microsoft deal. Obviously, there's a fee now on HTC phones, and we never got the full details, the public details of what that deal with Microsoft was. I'm looking at HTC now as a very popular phone producer. It's the one most people want. Certainly, when I got the Desire, there was a waiting list for people that were just new customers to my service provider, and there was a long waiting list. Do you think it's possible, or is there a chance that part of the unspoken deal between Microsoft and HTC was for HTC to produce a phone which was going to ship with the new Windows platform, considering its status and respect within the sort of mobile phone using community?
I think that's a theory. I came across a sort of a theory like this about a week ago, and that was the first time I saw it. I think the reason I saw this news is because Microsoft was introducing its own phone, and there was a bit of a surprise that HTC was one of the very few producers to choose to sort of dabble or to experiment with, I call it Vista Phone 7. The reason I call it that is because I'm trying to get across some points about the platforms. I tend to distort the names, and the reason I put Vista in is because Vista is a kind of synonymous with disaster to be, or something like that. But anyway, what actually happened is before the launch of the phones, the commitments I think Microsoft had with Samsung and with some other carrier. I think it was Verizon, which was doing the Kin, which failed. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was T-Mobile, which got burned on the on the Sidekick phones, and the whole disaster there of data loss and all that. So what actually happened with HTC doing the phones and being one of the leading companies to do that, just as it did with Google before, when they did the Google phones and when they did some of the early Android phones, people assumed that there was a bit of a deal and a bit of a personal relationship with Microsoft. Now, I want to just point something out. It's probably going to take me a few seconds. That HTC is about the 10th or maybe 12th company to sign a deal of this sort that actually includes Linux explicitly. It's important, it's explicit, because although Microsoft doesn't have specific Linux patents, as it's called, or as some lobbyists try to call it, Linux patents or false patents or something like that, although it doesn't have a specific list of patents, this is one of those deals where you know explicitly that HTC agreed for the press release to say that the infringing parts include Linux. So HTC basically agreed to a statement which says that they will be willingly paying Microsoft for Linux, knowing the implications and what it means to the community, which obviously will get angry. Now, before HTC, I only know of one company which had one report about it in Processors.com, which said that on the surface you'd think that HTC signed a very peaceful deal with Microsoft. What you don't know, and in the case of HTC, there's one report that implied that actually what happened is that Microsoft filed a lawsuit against HTC, and HTC very quickly responded to the lawsuit and tried to make it look like a very friendly deal, because HTC had already accumulated those lawsuits, especially from Apple. So I'm not sure if it was actually a deal between Microsoft and HTC. I think it's one of those very shady things that you don't know about exactly unless you talk to the people who are involved in it. I think Microsoft was basically threatening to sue HTC, and as we know, it actually sued Motorola a few weeks ago. So we know Microsoft is happily doing that sort of stuff. Apparently Motorola was basically willing to go to court. Motorola has lots of patents. It's a very well-established company. With HTC, it's a fairly, as far as I know, and I could be wrong about this because I haven't checked, HTC is a fairly young company, and they don't have patents. I know they don't have many patents for whatever reason. Samsung has lots of patents, and they're like the top patentor in Europe, and I think the United States are like number 2 or something. Some of these companies like HTC, they're very scared of companies suing them. And in the case of Apple, they were trying not to pay Apple for Android, so they basically went to court. With Microsoft, I think they basically had enough with the Apple circumstances, and they just said, well, we'll just pay you some money. And we had companies do that before. Microsoft basically threatens, and they just announce the deal instead.
Well, moving on from the mobile phone issue now, is there anything else on your list of topics that we want to discuss?
One thing I thought about talking about was, well, I know I actually did a post about mono